Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Podcast is Harvey Pitt, Head of Digital Responsibility at Addvert. That's Addvert. Addvert provides a unique suite of strategy, tools, accreditation, and creativity to humanize the way companies communicate online. And now, over to the conversation with Harvey Pitt. Harvey, thanks so much for joining us today here on the Private Podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to come on.
Good stuff. So, you've had an interesting history, but right now you're working with an organization called Addvert. Can you tell us a little bit more about the company?
Of course, so Addvert was set up about 4 years ago, about 2018. Don't think that it was a coincidence that was sort of around the time of the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Hmm.
And it was set up by three guys, and they basically had realised that there's there's a gap in the industry in terms of social media content creation for people that want to do things in a different way and want to do it with a bit more of a respect for the user on the other end of the screen. And they don't want to be manipulating them. They want to be working with them to help them find the brands that they will love or the content that they'll love and the content that they'll enjoy. So they try to sort of come at this sort of started as an influencer partnership agency and then sort of a creative agency, so making creative content for social media platforms for different users accounts and different brands accounts, but trying to do it all with this new sort of angle that this isn't social media can be a much better space than it is, and
Hmm.
um, let's get away from the harms that we see so often and try and do things in a new different way that's really trying to promote things in the best way possible.
Cool. So, is that basically what inspired you to join the company? I mean, based on at least what I know about your past, I imagine like the team, the founders must have been really compelling for you to want to stay in social media, but in a different way.
Yeah, so the sort of story of why I joined was I was working as a trust and safety analyst for a company, but I was subcontracted to Facebook. And so I was sort of going through the worst of the worst content that I was seeing on Facebook day in, day out, 5 days a week. And what I started to notice is that the bulk of harmful content on social media actually isn't because someone's being malicious. It's not because someone's stupid and misinformed. It's actually for profit. It's for the advertising money that they get at the end of it. So bot accounts that are posting links to articles of misinformation aren't doing it because they want to corrupt democracy in America. Some of them may be, but the bulk of them are actually because there's a lot of money in it. There's a brilliant story of a town in North Macedonia, I think it is, called Velez. Um, and there's a book
Yeah.
called The Book of Velez, which plays on this. I don't know if you know the story, but
I think I'm familiar
basically,
with it, but some sort of explanation I think for everybody else would be terrific.
um, basically, they what happened in this town was kids, teenagers that spoke good English started writing fake news stories and posted them on Facebook and trying to get them to go viral on Facebook. And these these kids were making a fortune, thousands of pounds every day or dollars, and they were doing it because they had these news stories on different websites that were named things that might look like semi trustworthy, and the ads that were running on there were making them extremely profitable. And yeah, the Book of Velez is a book I recommend to absolutely everyone. I think it just tells the story of how advertising corrupts the internet just so beautifully. And when you get to the end, you realise that, well, it's not all as it might have seemed in the in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've seen stories like that, time and time again, where it's like this Russian content farm, this Macedonian content farm, and yeah, you end up with sites that like The Onion, but not so far fetched,
Yeah,
or the Canadian version, the Beaverton, where it's like, okay, clearly this is satire, or within a few stories, you figure out, even if you're of average intelligence, I'll say, this is clearly satire. Like, I figured that out now. Great, and so now you can enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, these sites that you're talking about often stray, I think, so close to the truth, but not that it makes it actually much more difficult to discern what's real, what's not. And you're right, like that you have names that like are like small towns in England or rural America and stuff like that. So it's like the Maiden's Head Times, and you're like, oh, this must be like a nice local newspaper. No, it's some person in a random Eastern European country, often Eastern European country, not always, just making stuff up, and but making it seem so plausible that like people start to believe it.
but to come back to your question, why that inspired me to go and join Advert, uh, it was the opportunity to go and tell brands the story that from where I had been and tell them the story of how their ad revenue is doing this harm and they might not
Mm,
realize it, and their ads might be running on these misinformation websites without them realizing it and supporting it. So how, like, telling that story and sort of showing how they can use their social media influence to do more good than they're currently doing. There's also the other sort of, it's not just about misinformation, it's also about brands appearing alongside things like apetamin, which is a weight gain drug to try and create that sort of hourglass figure, but it's actually incredibly dangerous. If you look on Facebook and Instagram, that's still sold, and it's been an issue for years that many people, health experts, have raised, but it continues. The same with COVID products and sort of faux COVID cures and COVID misinformation. All of these were issues that I was working on, and I saw the brands and the money which they put into uh, social media platforms. Digital ad spend is expected to be, I think, over 600 billion by 2026. Um, was doing more harm than good, and I felt like that was something which, if my mission, which is to try and make the internet a better place, for that to be realised, we need to get brands on side with this.
hmm Okay. Um, so, like, why do you feel like I think this is a term that you brought to us, humanizing online experiences? Why do you feel like that's so important, and where does Advert play in that area to making sure that you're helping companies communicate online in this humanizing positive way?
So I think for anyone that's not familiar with ad tech or even just any sort of digital advertising,
Sure.
the industry would probably look completely bewildering at first sight. You have CTR, CPM, ECPM, CPC, all of these different acronyms that correspond to all of these different figures. You would honestly think that it was, advanced mathematics going on, because that is currently how digital advertising sees people. It doesn't see them as humans, it sees them as numbers. And digital advertising campaigns are run to maximize the numbers. They're not run to respect the human on the other end of the
Right.
screen. In fact, the human on the other end of the screen is completely forgotten. So if you sort of follow the maximizing of these numbers and these stats for your client to the natural conclusion, you're going to A B test your targeting criteria to oblivion until you end up at a hyper targeted group of people. You're going to follow them around the internet. You're going to want to track them everywhere, all just to look for these small marginal 0.5% gains in
hmm
your figures. At Advert, we see things differently. We think that the privacy conscious consumer has been overlooked for years. Web3 sort of direction might be recognizing that now, but at least for the time being, the privacy conscious consumer has been overlooked for years, and people don't really want care for being completely followed so much. And actually, if you find a way of resonating with the people that you do connect with, that do click on your ad, rather than trying to boost that number as high as possible, that will probably get you better results in the certainly in the long term.
Yeah.
Maybe in the short term, it might take a bit longer to sort of tell that story about how you're doing things differently. But I mean, if you look at some of the most successful companies for at marketing in history, there's something like this going on. I think Patagonia is a great example. Patagonia doesn't run many digital ads, and the ads that they do run, they tend to run in they continue to run them in sort of trade specific
Yeah,
magazines. They might
magazines,
run
right?
them in a ski
Yeah.
magazine or a snowboarders magazine or a surfing magazine or climbing magazine, and because they know that's where their audience are. And it's the same. As a brand, you know where your audience is. You don't need these to track people and try and show them outside of that space. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of get away from the optimization of numbers and get to more the uh, relating to humans and thinking about this as if we're in the physical world and it's just two humans speaking to one another rather than a science of optimizing stats.
Yeah. Not to plug Orchid here, but like we've often had people in our community be like, "Why aren't you guys sponsoring this YouTuber on and running ads? NordVPN's doing it all the time. Surfshark's doing it all the time." Because Nord and Surfshark are interested in numbers, and realistically, Orchid has a privacy focused product, not a speed focused product, not a specific, choose my traffic can exit in England or in Turkey or whatever specific product. Like it's a different product. It's not just another VPN. And so I don't think there'd be any sort of good ROI sponsoring, X YouTuber to talk about Orchid. Realistically, we if we wanted to do something like Patagonia, we'd probably advertise in Wired magazine or in a journalism focused magazine or something like that, where the privacy angle would be far more appreciated as opposed to you know random X YouTuber with maybe a few thousand followers, or even if it was a million subscribers. Like it just the ROI probably wouldn't be there. So I totally get what you're saying there with Patagonia. I agree. That's very much an organization who knows their brand, knows their clients, and so much so that when I was in San Francisco earlier this month, I walked by a Patagonia store, and there was literally a lineup down the street for them to open at like 10 a.m. I'm like, this is it. It's an outdoor gear clothing store. Like, what? Why is there a lineup outside the store? It's not Boxing Day. It's not Black Friday. Like, it's not Christmas time. It's literally like June 3rd or something. I think it was a Friday or Saturday morning, and there's a lineup outside the store. So, like, clearly a rabid fan base. It on a random Friday or Saturday morning. That's not something you get. Uh, you know, running online advertising in most instances, at least.
And just coming back to what you said about looking for if or like why Orchid would never or would it wouldn't really make much sense for you to sponsor a YouTuber. It's like also like when you see these Surfshark and the other VPN things, they're these huge YouTubers with millions and millions of followers. For Orchid, it would make more sense to actually probably go for a much smaller influencer, but who's maybe focused on journalists, like tips for journalists when
Mm-hmm.
they're traveling abroad to stay safe.
Yeah.
That's you're gonna have much more of your audience going to be relevant to them than just going for a massive YouTuber that loads of people that are irrelevant. And you're still paying for those eyeballs with the massive YouTuber.
Right.
You're paying way more for that.
Yeah.
It works out much more. It's much more cost effective to actually think about your audience, think about the humans on the other end, and bring it to them when they want to hear it, and don't barrage them when they don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, so, we're talking about Patagonia and companies spending, hundreds of thousands, if not millions online to sponsor, YouTubers and stuff like that. How do you think actually, sorry, how does digital responsibility actually help build brand equity for companies then?
Yeah, so digital responsibility is this idea that it kind of it builds on the back of CSR. So in the 1970s, there was growing scientific evidence that, you know, we're getting to somewhere where the planet is going to be in a bad spot. And it was growing that, you know, brands need to put something, be a part of this mission. And CDR is sort of corporate digital responsibility. It's trying to stand on the shoulders of that and say, well, really, there's no difference between our online world and our offline world. They're the same thing.
Hmm.
So CSR has to sort of encompass um, some digital behaviours too. So and those digital behaviours that need to be responsible, and that's what digital responsibility is all about. Um, can you remind me of your question again? I just got so caught up in
That's okay. No, that
talking about digital responsibility.
yeah, no, that it's good to define that, especially for people who are, not non-native English speakers or new to this. So, yeah, like how does taking responsibility actually help them build brand equity?
Of course, yeah. So, well, it sort of worked backwards. We just spoke about Patagonia, one of the sort of first brands to really buy into the whole CSR thing. And yeah, like you say, look at the size of them now. Their growth has been incredible.
Hmm.
And it's because of they've stuck to the fact that they care about the planet and they know that their audience care about the planet. I think all of us now care about the planet, and it's like helped to grow so many brands like that have had sustainability as their focus have been able to grow. I think we're seeing that now. People are like beginning to realize that the internet does amazing things and has enormous potential, but it's also doing so much harm at the moment. And the brands that are playing a role in making it a better place are winning favor with consumers.
Right.
And the reason why I think is because it's something that people care about. Like people care about their children not being shown toxic beauty standards. Like this is something which really matters to them.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's not like a marketing exercise that can just sort of be done and thrown at people. Like it has like a real impact in people's lives. It's something which they spend. Social media, I think the average amount of time that people spend on social media is over 2.5 hours per day on average. It's a large chunk of um, people's life, and getting it right matters to these people and they notice, and it's something which is noticed, like it because you stand out because so few people are doing it at the moment as well, and that's such an important part of any sort of marketing is just to stand out and be different.
Yeah. And like on that, maybe not so much on the corporate social responsibility side of things, but certainly with governments pushing fuel car manufacturers to be more fuel efficient, to have more fuel efficient fleets, like across the board. Your average fuel efficiency has to keep climbing. Right? So whether you're using less liters per 100 kilometers or more miles per gallon, depending on your country you're in, um, that needs to continue to increase, so much so that we've got now big brands saying like by 2030, which is only 8 years from now, we're only going to be selling electric vehicles. I think Volvo is part of that. Chevrolet maybe not, part of that, or GM in general, but Cadillac I think is all electric going forward. Like all the new models are all going to be electric and stuff like that. Obviously, Tesla has been pushing this really hard, being an all electric brand. Polestar, Rivian, Lordstown if they ever release a vehicle, Lucid Motors also if they ever release a vehicle. Um, so but it's also been, Tesla especially has been pulling the rest of the industry kicking and screaming, ultimately into this all electric future. And while that doesn't prevent greenhouse gases from being emitted, because yes, the whole manufacturing process still involves that. I think if we can electrify things all the way down and bring more renewable energy into it, then the entire car industry looks better because they're using less energy to produce more or less the same thing, and then that thing that you actually buy uses far less energy over its lifetime, hopefully. I think we still need some long-term studies to do that, but I mean, like that's been an industry where It's been very hesitant to change. Famously, GM killed their highly popular, really usable electric car back in like 1992, the Saturn EV1 or whatever it was called, even though it worked really well and people loved it because, they might piss off Shell and BP and all these other, Exxon Mobil and all these other really big energy companies that maybe they weren't in bed with, but they were certainly friendly with. And we've seen a really big sea change in that. I think partially driven by people and the science, and then other brands saying like, no, yeah, we can do that. Let's do that now.
Yeah, I think also if coming back to how it builds brand equity is just another thing that I was thinking of is obviously if you see a brand that you like appearing next to misinformation, you're going to be like pissed off. Usually, that's not something that I want a brand that I like to do.
Yeah,
And actually, the brands that you truly love don't need to track you and all of that because you're going to keep coming back to them naturally anyway. So it builds brand equity because if you do a good job of marketing to people with digital responsibility, they're they're coming back in organic ways rather than sort of forced, uh, where you're like forcing them to go a certain direction.
yeah, we've actually got a local ISP here in London, Ontario called Start.ca that I think has done an incredible job of building up their own brand equity through just having a really good product and having great
Yeah,
customer service and taking advantage primarily of offline advertising, billboards and stuff like that, bus shelters, and promoting themselves that way, sponsoring various events. They're sponsoring a big concert that's happening now or next week here in London. So, but people love them. People love them because it works and it works really well, and they deliver on what they advertise, as opposed to Rogers, Bell, Telus running all sorts of online advertising. Certainly being part of this of the problem, for lack of a better term, off the top of my head, and using Google Ad Serve or whatever it's called now, like using the big Google and Facebook driven marketing platforms because they think, because they need to target. They're so big, they're mostly just stealing market share from each other at this point, as opposed to just delivering a really, really good product. I just ditched the Bell for this very reason because and it wasn't the advertising, it was the service sucks where I live. So I left for a company who can deliver a better product where I live, even though I've been with them before and it's very expensive. I need reliable service. So
it's like the targeted ad that probably everyone has seen that's listening to this podcast, just off included, is Wish.com. Like
hmm.
Wish.com must be one of the biggest advertising sites. They always find something to target you with to advertise, and I don't think it's a coincidence that number one, it's a low quality good. They know that they've got to hit you in that moment when you're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
interesting." They've got to
Hmm.
capitalize on that spike in interest, and they're also one of the least trusted brands when on the Axios Harris poll of trusted brands in America. They consistently come down the bottom of that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence because the companies that can maintain themselves by targeted advertising, they have to have such low costs elsewhere if that's the only way that they're acquiring customers and if they don't have customers coming back organically.
Yeah, for sure. I've bought a few things off Wish.com. I wish I hadn't. Um, so I don't think you've covered this, so I want to ask the questions. Which brands do you think are actually getting it right in digital advertising and specifically, if you want to, on social, I don't know if I want to call it social media anymore, but social media, social networking sites.
There are probably three or four that spring to mind. Dove
Hmm.
are have done some exceptional campaigns on this. Their most recent one, they created deep fakes of children's mothers giving beauty advice that was given by and health advice that was given by TikTok influencers. So and then sat the mum and the child in the room together and went through like a TikTok feed, and then all of a sudden their mum pops up, and she's giving this like awful, um, really quite harmful beauty advice, and it just does a great job of number one showing where deep fakes
Hmm.
are in terms of how accurate they are, and number two in how horrific this advice is and how damaging it can be, and educating both children and mothers. And it's got a little bit after like how often do you sort of hear advice like this? The mum asks to the kid and the kids, and they say like, like at least 4 or 5 videos every hour I'm on there. I see it's giving
Right.
this sort of advice. Yeah, I really thoroughly recommend watching that ad. It's only like 2 minutes. I think it's just cool. If you search Dove deepfake ad, I'm sure it'll come up. The second company um, that's done a quite a good job recently, um, although there's a debate as to whether this one is privacy washing, if you want to call it that, is Apple with this data broker ad. I'm not sure if you've seen it, where they're sort of run like it looks like an auction, but it's for
Oh,
people's
okay.
data. And it does a really good job, I think, of actually explaining how advertisers bid on your data. Although whether how sincere Apple's efforts are in terms of privacy is up for debate. I like to think that they've got the right intentions, but I think they're currently under
I
a
hope
court
so too.
case in Germany for their sort of yeah.
As we both speak
With
from our
their
MacBooks.
there's a court case in Germany. Yeah, I'm not because of now like full Apple ecosystem buy-in, but yeah, I know that there's sort of a court case in Germany that the whole privacy angle by Apple is anti-competitive. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that is. Um, the third third company, Dell and Intel recently won a Cannes Lion, which is like the sort of ad
Hmm.
Oscars almost, if you want to explain it like that. They just did a really cool. They just showed how they're trying to take as much of the technology which they developed for other things that might be seen as creepy, like voice recognition and creating voice profiles, but how they can then use that to give people with like motor neuron disease um, their voice back, which it is really just like an incredibly moving ad. And then, sort of on the agency side, if you're looking at agencies that are doing a good job, Ogilvy, who are quite a big
Yeah.
advertising agency, have just recently announced that they're not going to work with influencers that excessively modify sort of Photoshop their
Huh.
body or face to unrealistic standards to sell products. So there is good work that is being done out there by some of the big players, but it's definitely not like a status quo thing.
Yeah. I'm surprised you didn't mention Advert, but I guess you don't want to be too over the top either. I'm probably just not running in these circles. I haven't seen those Dove ads. I don't watch a lot of TV, so if they're running on TV, and when I do watch TV, it's usually sports. So, like live TV. So I guess I'm not running in the right circles to see that ad in particular. Um, it's funny you mentioned the Dell and Intel thing with only now because I just heard recently that Amazon wants to offer the ability for you to basically clone another person's voice for your Amazon Echo. And I'm not going to use the assistant's name in fear that I might set off somebody's device, which saying the word Echo might also do it. So sorry, but sorry in advance, or maybe after with the fact. Anyway, so it's like, so if your grandparent has passed away, or an aunt or an uncle, or maybe even a child, you can actually have the device replicate their voice with like as little as 10 seconds of recording of listening to the voice. And I'm like, okay, feeling very Black Mirror right now. um B, that
That was
was
a Black
yeah,
Mirror
yeah,
episode,
but
I'm
it
pretty
led
sure.
to like, I'm gonna get this
It,
robot version of my ex-husband that's now dead. And a whole series of other, like, it just went really far down the rabbit hole. But yes, I do remember that episode.
just got to wait for that humanoid
It's come
Tesla
up it's
robot.
come up on the private podcast before. um but I was like, oh my God, like it's literally Black Mirror. Like it's the beginning of that episode, and we're just and of course they're already sex robots, so like pair the sex robot with the voice, and like, you can have a facsimile of somebody. Um, anyway, like what do you like? Obviously, there are positive and as you or positive, ways to use that technology, as you just pointed out. Like somebody who has lost their voice for whatever reason, might be able to talk Stephen Hawking like, through a computer, but have it obviously sound far more realistic and like their own voice again, as opposed to, eyeballing sounds and characters and words to get their point across. Like how do you guys feel about that, or how do you feel about that? About, just I'm gonna play Harvey Pitt's voice for a minute, and then all of a sudden, this Amazon Echo device is going to be able to recreate his voice in a fairly realistic way.
So the reason the Intel and Bell ad was just so cool is because they basically had a book written, and the book made throughout the book was about keeping your voice and never losing your
Mm,
voice, and that my body might be deteriorating, but I'll keep my voice is sort of the tagline. But it's just great because it's explaining to family members about what they're going through and stuff like that, and it is incredibly moving. But like you say, once the tech is out there, it's bound to be commercialized and sold to consumers and used for whatever means it might be used for, whether that's going into sex robots or just your dead grandma reading you a bedtime story, as was the Amazon sort of use case.
yeah.
Uh, it's terrifying. I think it's like something that as a society we have to find a way of coping with. I personally think that if you go around your mate's house and all of a sudden their Amazon Echo starts talking as their dead grandma, you're probably gonna not hang out with them that much. But maybe that will be a thing. Maybe that will be the sort of sad reality that we live in the future, where part of coping with your breakup is listening to your ex-girlfriend's voice and plowing through a tub of Ben and Jerry's, which is terrifying. But maybe that's where we're going, and yeah, like I think that's up to us as a society to decide what we think's acceptable and what we think's unacceptable. And I think those sort of things are going to be very much what we decide is creepy and what we decide isn't creepy. And there isn't much room for regulation in that. It's a
Yeah.
culture thing.
Yeah. That and I guess that's fine. Like I'm not saying, we need to make it illegal. But the potential use cases are both really interesting and incredibly scary. And one Black Mirror thing, episode that I do remember, and I do definitely do not want to happen, is like the icon the contact lens thing, where basically it's recording every single memory you've ever had, and you can like scrub back and forth and be like, oh no, this is how it actually happened, instead of relying on your memory. I'm just going to rely on my memory. I don't need something recording my vision and hearing 24/7 so that I can play it back for a friend or family. I don't need that. So that's definitely something I don't want to see come through. Um okay, so this is particularly pertinent to the Dove ad. So like what impact have you found social media has had on users' mental health? You were subcontracted out to Facebook for a while. You're doing your master's at the Oxford Internet Institute, which I am affectionately now calling OI because I can, and I don't go there, so nobody's gonna poop on me for it. Like what have you seen, either through your studies, through your past work experience, or even stuff you're reading now, and doing at Advert?
Um, the most terrifying statistic about social media is that since 2012, there's been a 94% increase in suicides amongst teenage girls. That is terrifying, and to me signifies that there is some sort of detrimental effect to people's mental health, and it was a matter of time until we prove that this is the case. It took many years to prove that cigarettes cause cancer. I think it would take many years to prove that social media in its current
Right.
form causes harmful mental health effects. But there definitely are solutions, and I think there's apps like you know Be Real is the latest app that's sort of trying to be like, oh no, like we're a social media platform that can, um, you know, give a more authentic side to what human life is about, and it sort of has the things within there. So for people that don't know what Be Real is, basically you get pinged once a day with a picture and you put it up of what you're doing at that moment. Everyone does it, and then you can sort of at the end of the day scroll through and see what everyone was up to at the day during that moment. But it's
Yeah.
almost like it's innate to humans to try and game these systems to be more than we are, to like show ourselves as being more than we are, and to be inauthentic. So Be Real people are leaving it until, waiting until that they do something something cool until they take their picture.
Like run
You know,
upstairs, be like, I'm putting on makeup, or like take a moment to like watch your face, be like, and then I'm gonna take the picture. Like it just yeah, like if you're passed out drunk, because that's what you did the night before, that's like I mean, either skip it, which I think is an option, right? Like if you could just skip the day, like or miss the day, and just skip it. Like it's like I think this constant need to look your best, and certainly I'm guilty of this every once in a while, but like it doesn't really serve anybody. And which is one of the reasons I post so little on any platform, especially once photo focused on photo and video. Like I don't think I have anything really that interesting to say, and I'm not going out of my way to make a beautiful scene and and pretend I have this super glamorous life, which I know some people in crypto think I do. I'm having fun, but like I don't have a Lambo, I'm not driving it around every day, etc. Like it's not that glamorous. I'm a single dad with three kids. Like I have really rough days sometimes, and the need to sugarcoat that um has just led to all sorts of problems, I think, especially among women, but even among men too.
oh, definitely. I think it's just more silent and men probably because we don't talk about it as much. And another sort of example of the inauthentic nature that we have as humans, it seems to be at least anyway, is that there's sort of trend of Instagram dumps where people are sort of like, oh yeah, these are just eight random pictures off my camera roll, and actually it's like this faux nonchalance to social media where these are some of the most curated, like sort of like, oh, this is actually an
For
amazing
sure.
sunset that I just caught, and then this is me like really not trying to look cool, but I am. And I have no time for it, but I might be a luddite that's stuck in the past. Who knows? I think that there's something really cool in what social media should really be about is not replacing life itself, but facilitating it. And I think if we can take the internet in that direction, then we're going in the right way. So, give me an app that I can say places that I'd like to visit and when I'd want to visit them. And my friends can see that too. And then we can just
Hmm.
organize trips to that place. That's something
Yeah.
that's helping me reduce the search costs of cool things to do at the weekend and making me go outside and enjoy the real world and live life itself. That's personally the direction that I'd like to see tech used in. We'll see if that happens.
Well, according to the last Apple WWDC keynote, that's all Apple. That's Mail and Notes and whatever other apps they've introduced recently to the iPad. That's we'll do it all in here. You just got to make sure you're using other apps to follow those accounts. I actually follow one that promotes provincial parks here in Ontario because there are a surprising number of provincial parks, and B, some that A, you don't realize or I guess B, you don't realize are so close. C, have really fun stuff to do. And so like I follow one that's like Adventure Ontario or Adventure Parks or something like that. And it's like, oh shoot, like I didn't know that one existed. You look at it and you're like, oh shit, it's 14 hours away. But I'm not driving I'm not driving 14 hours away this weekend. But like there are ones that even that just remind me of like, oh yeah, like Arcona, conservation area. It's actually pretty close and it's really nice. They actually have like a small waterfall there. Like it's just, and so that's a good reminder to yeah, get out. Like it's like 30 minutes from here, 45 tops. I can be there in no time and I can enjoy my day being outside as long as the weather's nice or if I don't mind the rain. I think we got time for one more question here. Uh, so taking all of this, taking your experience being a subcontractor at Facebook and your studies and your time with Advert. Like, how do you think we can actually create? And you also wrote a really interesting piece for thedrum.com about what you think Twitter will be like in 2025, assuming, which is actually looking less and less likely right now, assuming Elon Musk does buy it out and take it private. How do you think we can actually create a safer digital world, especially for kids, but for everybody in general?
Um, I think there's lots being done in this space. So um, the AI and the algorithms for content moderation are getting stronger, and that is absolutely essential because having humans look at the worst, like we're not cut out for it mentally. It's not something that our brains are designed to do. So also,
Hmm.
also these content moderators are paid really poorly in comparison to the rest of the company, even though they're probably doing some of the most important work, sort of outsourced to
Yeah.
some of the poorest countries in the world, and they're forced to sort of look through some of the worst content. So part of it is getting the algorithms right, but with that is going to come more and more smoke and mirrors and more people claiming that the algorithm isn't treating them fairly. So for social media to truly change and be better, there is going to be there's got to be sort of two things. The first is more customizability on the user side, but keeping that accessible. So it's not like Mastodon is sort of one Web3 social network that I've heard of in
Hmm.
the seniors, but it still feels quite inaccessible to a broad public. And I think like if we're
Yeah.
going to go that sort of highly customizable direction where there can be lots of sort of different apps that are interoperable, talking to each other with different algorithms. So yeah, if you want your algorithm to keep in the QAnon conspiracy theories, then yeah, go for it. That's the way that I think. Like, have that in your algorithm, but the default one should probably cut them out. And default options is really important. Having the default be something which is best for the largest group of people, it really matters. But if you want your feed to be full of junk, then yeah, let it download that algorithm and install that algorithm onto your social media and let it happen. But so that's the first one. The second sort of thing is acceptance. Like people need to accept that not everyone on social media is going to think the same way as they do. Have healthy debate if it's something that you're looking for, but also if there are people that are going looking at QAnon conspiracy theories or Pizzagate or whatever it might be, we're going to have to accept that that's going to happen. And people, like, I don't think that there is a solution to completely cut it out forever. And unfortunately, the internet has reduced search costs so that they can find each other and amass an even larger following. So we're going to have to accept that that's going to
Hmm.
happen and find a way of dealing with that as a society. I'm not too sure what that solution looks like, but I think that having algorithms that are sort of an industry around trust and safety algorithms will be really important part in that, and that requires them being open, that you can download different ones so that there can be some competition, so they can be each driving one another to be more and more competitive on that front.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people are pushing for right now, and I'm interested to see the results. I'm interested to see what interested, not excited, to see what Truth Social built on, a decentralized social graph, whether that's Twitter with TBD and whatever they're doing, or Lens Protocol or something similar. What that looks like. Like it's, Ceramic. We've had somebody from Ceramic on the show recently. Like, I might not like the results, but we need to experiment and we need to see what that actually looks like to see if it works or not. And we don't know unless we try. Harvey, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. If somebody wants to learn more about you or what you're doing, what's the best channels for them to go do that?
So you can follow Addvert on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever that might be. It's Addvert with two Ds. The best way to sort of like, a lot of the things that we spoke about today, like what brands are doing social media marketing well and which ones are doing them bad. We have a newsletter called Byte. It's super short. It's just 8 bits of content from across the internet. We have a creative winner in there and a creative loser. So we showcase someone that's doing this really well, and we showcase someone that's doing things wrong. It's usually Facebook. um, but I really I think they're leading. I think they're on about 15 creative leaders so far, so they're not doing too great. But
Nice. So they're winning at something. That's good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, I think that a lot of your listeners will really enjoy getting that into their email inbox. It's super short, like you can scroll through it. It's like we try and have it like a almost like a social media feed, but it's just little bits of content that we found around the internet that are related to social media and privacy. So that's probably the best way to stay in touch. And any new products or anything that we launch, we'll announce them in there first.
Okay, terrific. For everybody listening, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, stay free.